All right, we're back with another show of The Optimistic American. Today I have Josh Abrams and Matt Burgess who are on our show. They're going to talk about what are called citizen assemblies. Now, this device, it's really been evolving, but it's a way in which you can engage local citizens on any given problem and how that might connect to our local officials. They do it through a random selection process. And if you're interested in how we cure the divisions that we have in this country, this will be of interest to you. The real key, I think, for our country, there's never been any place like the United States of America. We've done more to advance human progress than any other nation. But oftentimes we see that people lose hope and they watch what's going on. They feel like we can have no effect. Our voice doesn't matter. All of that's understandable. The key is agency. How do you begin to make people recognize that the actions that they take actually have an effect on the future? And these citizens' assemblies that are now beginning to happen in rural communities are a real model for how we can do this in an exceptional way. Now, I'm just an ordinary, optimistic American who still believes that the United States is the greatest cause for good ever. If you agree with that and you like what it is that what we might be able to do to engage more citizens, push that subscribe button and let's get this show going. Well, Josh and Matt, I would like to welcome both of you to the Optimistic American and appreciate you coming on today.
Thanks for having us.
Happy to be here. Thanks very much.
All right, now I know I'm going to say the name of the organization wrong again. It's Duchette Citizen Assembly. Is that correct or incorrect?
Yeah, you're on target. We're here in Deschutes County in Central
Deschutes
Oregon.
County. Well, I'm not going to be able to run for office in that county. That's obviously a done deal. All right, so let's start though with asking this question. What is the problem that you're trying to solve with this organization? I think it's a fascinating organization. I've enjoyed reading about it and understanding it better, which is why we invited you on the show. But I'd love to know what problem you think that you're trying to solve.
Great question, Paul. I think it's important to frame this in as really a two-part problem in some ways. One is fairly narrow. We here in Central Oregon have got one of the highest rates of youth homelessness in the state of Oregon and frankly around the country. And that's for a variety of reasons. But what it boils down to is in our school systems here and across the community, there are well over 1,000 young adults and children who are either couch surfing and unable to really commit to school, their families are unsheltered, or they're in some way experiencing some level of homelessness. And so that is the topic that we've chosen for this first civic assembly. But there's a whole nother reason that we've chosen this type of deliberative democracy.
Yeah, and let's go into that because I think if I'm correct on this, that's the problem that you've chosen for the citizen assembly. But let's talk about what is a citizen assembly. Why is it? Why is there a value to it? What is it what's the purpose behind a citizen assembly?
Yeah, that's really where we come into this. In Central Oregon, we've got a rich history of civic engagement, but nonetheless, the vast majority of our residents and citizens really aren't involved. They're left out of the process. As you know, across the U.S. right now, many people feel as if they're not heard, as if they don't have a seat at the table in decision making. Faith in institutions is at an all-time low. And here we're no different than at other places in the country where rural and urban divides are exacerbated by political divisions. We're one of the fastest growing small cities in the country with also the type of socioeconomic inequities that go along with that. And what a citizens assembly does is really push through all of the noise and bring people who are everyday residents of the community together for an extended period of time to kind of remember what it's like to have some civil discourse, to be a part of making decisions and rebuild this virtuous cycle of trust between the government and the citizenry. And that's our short-term goal in this one period, is to involve the people in decision making on a topic that's of vital importance to our community, but also to rebuild that civic muscle in a way.
Matt, why did you get involved in this?
So this is something that started out back in 2020 when we'd done an initiative called the Decency Project here. And that was how do we bring together and solve the problems at the time in the last administration that was occurring, we were seeing between Trump supporters and non-Trump supporters. And to Josh's comment there, how do we, put in place and flex our dialogue and deliberation muscles that seem to be atrophying and lacking? So um, I predominantly got involved and spearheaded bringing Claudia out here after that. And it was how do we enable communities in Central Oregon, where Central Oregon is at the dividing line, if you will, of the greater Idaho movement. We have all of the same challenges that are in other areas across the country, across the globe on a micro level. So we have the ability to experiment, to be able to try new solutions, to be able to, leverage the community that we have here, and how do we problem solve? Um, so I think that's the key for me in that respect. And I want to come back to what Josh was mentioning as well, and to your pointed question as to what's the purpose here. And part of the purpose is it's at the last weekend of the first assembly, Josh kicked it off with a very poignant piece that I thought was incredibly impactful. And he told the story of his background of 25 plus years of military service and being thanked for his service. And paraphrasing here, so Josh can correct me, but he said, I always felt that there were a number of people who should be thanked that were not being thanked, whether NGOs, whether intelligence community individuals, so on and so forth. We were thanked as veterans, but others were being left out. And he specifically called out the delegates or assembly members that had been nominated for, and in this random, assembly drawing, that were nominated to serve on the assembly here. And he said, all of us owe you a great deal of thanks for your public service because it's so important here. And what was so impactful for me as part of that was that there were people who were delegates that were pretty emotional that said, no one's ever asked me for my opinion before. No one's asked me what I thought. And so part of um, the citizens assemblies writ large it is about that civic service. It's about giving people agency in the problems that we face and trying to problem solve those, and having a voice in that. It is about education. Part of the reasons for citizens assemblies is that they're generally focused around stuck or complex issues. And the issues that we have are so complex and complicated that we all need to be educated on it and not make assumptions. And that so much of the work that goes into the assembly process is educating individuals as to here is youth homelessness. Here is the abortion issue. Here is divorce, whatever the topic is. Here's childcare. And information is coming at us all so fast and furious, and we're all overwhelmed that we don't have the time to really dig in and understand the complexities and nuances. So we get the headlines and the sound bites that also cause division. And this is that opportunity for that education, that service, that flexing those muscles of deliberation and dialogue that have atrophied. And so I think it's so important what Josh outlined and how he put the assembly at the beginning here that we had last weekend of the importance of this public service.
All right, so I'm going to unpack some of the things that you're talking about because I believe that they're profound and important concepts. I'm going to start with this. We certainly have big divisions in this country. In fact, I think if you went back in our country's history, what you'd figure out is we've had big divisions in this country since the day we started. That's not anything new.
Yep.
One of the things that, though, is true is that we seem to have lost the ability to listen to one another. I'm not quite sure. I had an event. We're trying to push for an open primary here in Arizona, and I had an event, and I had a Hispanic who stood up and spoke, and said that what they didn't like about this was that they felt like they were just getting hold of the system and they were going to come into play, and now they were coming into the age and we were going to change the rules out from underneath them. And my comment to them was is that there's nothing in the open primary that stops Hispanics from being elected. In fact, if you look at open primaries in cities across the country, Hispanics do very well in open primaries. But it does mean that you have to listen to other people. And their concern was, why are we going to let MAGA get back control? And again, the answer is, what's the harm in you listening to a MAGA member? What's the harm in you trying to understand where a MAGA member is coming from? How do we fix the problems in this country, the divisions in this country, if we're not even willing to listen to one another? How does the Citizen Assembly help on that issue?
Yeah, you've really struck on one of the central cores of what it is we're trying to do. That sometimes we'll refer to a citizen jury or a citizen assembly as, in this case, the county in one room. Of course, you can do them at any level, from local to national, but we've focused on Deschutes County, and we truly use this sortition process where we sent out 12,000 mailers to residents, random residences throughout the county, and offered people the opportunity to respond. When they do respond, they fill out a demographic, a couple of questions so that we can identify and then build a representative sample of what the community's demographics are. So we are guaranteed, and what we've got here is across the line, the same percentage of Democrats, Republicans, and independents, of young people and older people, of everything except for we did miss the boat just a teeny bit. We needed one more person to volunteer from the Latino community here, but we've done a lot of outreach there. But in essence, we're bringing people into a room together for 5 full days, and you can't actually sit down and listen to one another just for a couple of minutes. You can't do it, obviously, in a social media comment section where most of the vitriol is flung around in this country. And we've already seen that people from all of these different backgrounds, and we we do half-day sessions. At the end of those half days, we mix everyone up so they're sitting next to someone else, and they're building this rapport. They're actually going beyond just someone's opinion and their sort of tagline, if you will, to get to why they feel that way, what their lived experience is. And it's sort of remembering what it means to have some empathy, to actually listen to one another. A colleague of ours said this very well the other day, to remember how to disagree agreeably. And you can't get anywhere, you can't find compromise, which is what we have to do in order to solve problems, without actually getting to the root of why we have these opinions. And I'll say, there's been historically with citizens' assemblies around the world, we here are adopting one of the premise that the assembly members must reach a supermajority consensus on any recommendations that they're giving back to the government, which means some people are going to have to come off of their positions. And recently, members of an assembly in Paris on homelessness, the 20% or so who didn't get what they thought should be the recommendations, came out and made public statements that said, while we disagree with these recommendations, we actually agree with the process that got us there, and we support the recommendations because we were there, we were in the room with these people, we became a mini legislature in a sense, but we didn't have special interests behind us, we didn't have campaign finance behind us. We're just people who give a damn, who want to solve a problem together.
Matt, give me your experience on this issue.
The experience on the issue of assemblies writ large, or the experience on...
I think both on the idea of the assembly as well as trying to get people to listen to one another.
Look, Josh knows this. My goal in life is to die naive versus cynical. Because cynical means I've given up and it's fuck it all, so on and so forth. Naive means I'm constantly optimistic and curious. And this is something where I think people are hungry for. I'm optimistic about that. People are hungry for being able to sit down. They're hungry for being able to be heard. As much as it's listening, it's being able to be heard. And you would think that in the world that we have, where we have more communication channels than ever, people don't feel heard. And my experience with the assembly processes is that, just as I outlined, that when, and I can't emphasize this enough, for someone to say, no one's ever listened to me, no one's ever asked me what I think. This is, giving people that opportunity, just as in our jury system, if you will, that you're selected at random to come make decisions on what happens in criminal cases, so on and so forth. This is jury duty for problems, civic service, civic issues, so on and so forth. And I think people genuinely want to have a seat at the table. And so it is hard. It's messy. Democracy's hard and messy. And it's not something that we're going to change overnight. But I think people also are looking for examples. And I think all of us, the responsibility is on all of us to set the examples in a world where this scarcity mindset, this attention economy is driving, our behaviors, if you will. People are hungry for, no, I want to be able to sit down and not vilify a relative, a friend of mine, a colleague, whatever it may be. And it's okay that issues may be uncertain or solutions may be uncertain, but people want to roll up their sleeves and actively, problem solve. And they haven't, in many cases, been given that opportunity. This gives them that opportunity that I think is so powerful in this regards.
Yeah, the idea that we talk about how do we solve our problems. I liken a democracy to a marriage. And if you could imagine somebody saying, "Well, we're married, now I'm done with the problems, and I'm going to all the rest should be clean sailing, and I don't need to address the challenges." There's always challenges. Just take two people and put them together,
Yep.
and there are differences. How do you work those out? Communication, talking, meeting with one another, listening to one another. You also had mentioned the media, and one of my big concerns is that the media, it's become very profitable to be pessimistic. It's become very profitable to be negative. And I'm not just talking about the newspapers and the nightly news, but the same is true with social media. There's a drive to kind of hit that amygdala inside of you so that it terrifies you a little bit, and it stops your ability for your cognitive senses, your neocortex to be able to engage. And when that amygdala hijack takes place, you're terrified, you start to react in a terrified way. Now, this is an area where there's communication happening. How's the media interacting with that? Are they interacting at all? Do they take part? Are they invited to the meetings? What's their role?
I'll let Josh answer one aspect here, and Josh, I'll defer to you in terms of how the media, played a role in relation to the assembly. On the broader issue of it, the economic incentives, and we discussed this briefly at the assembly. The economics incentives are short term, and I'm framing this as we have created an environment which I would argue is around, I call them digital Boeings. And I use Boeing as a very specific, analogy, because if Boeing had a decade ago invested in quality and integrity and safety, security, so on and so forth, their economics would be up and to the right. And all these media companies and social media, they're making short-term profits. And yes, they're hitting our amygdalas, and it's the, provocative, if it bleeds, it leads type of environment. It's causing great damage to capitalism as a whole. It's causing, we all know it's causing great societal damage. And so when I talk about assemblies as well, yes, this is a nonprofit, if you will. I don't think that's the right way of framing it. These are indirect returns that businesses, if you want strong economics, if you want strong communities and strong societies, then you need to be investing in things like this, because it provides the substrate and foundations for strong economic returns. We will see, if we continue down the path of it bleeds, it leads type of aspects. Those are short-term economic returns that make a narrow set of companies, whatever may be, wealthy, but that's just going to, that gravy train won't last, if you will. And so I think we need to be pushing this as this type of effort, these types of initiatives. This is about, if you want massive economic returns in your local communities, across your states, across your country, so on and so forth, then this is where you need to be investing like mad. And this builds that great economic foundation. So That's a longer piece, but it goes to the media side in terms of the local and how they engaged. I'll defer to Josh on this aspect.
Yeah, we're extraordinarily fortunate here. In very stark contrast, I think, to what Matt's talking about with capital N news. We're here in the local area. This is Central Oregon is pretty self-contained, and the news here is about what's happening here. It's not about trying to drive looks and likes, through the amygdala. People want to know how we're solving problems locally, and the media here has been extraordinarily receptive. From our first big city club meeting where we announced the intent to do this back in April, local broadcast media, the weekly, the daily, Oregon Public Broadcast and NPR that are here have all been very curious. And this is a new concept, and the idea that people can kind of come together in this cohesive way is inspiring to people. And at the same time, we have to be very cognizant that local media and local news is not a luxury, and the fact that it's a threatened species. Local newspapers, local TV stations are being bought out and going under like wildfire, and that's something that we as a nation need to figure out. Fortunately, here in Central Oregon, we've got really strong local media. Paul, I think I was wondering if it'd be useful to backtrack a bit and go over in very short terms just exactly how a civic assembly works.
Definitely. And my next question was going to be how it connects to the elected bodies so that results actually matter. But definitely go through that.
That's perfect. And I'm going to do this in as succinct a way as possible because it's a little bit complex. But basically, we talked about that lottery selection. So we chose 30 delegates for this assembly who represent the demographics of the county. They came together already for the first 2 of 5 days, and they learned from subject matter experts, from people with lived experience, from government officials, just what the breadth and depth of the challenge of youth homelessness is, applies to any topic. And they were able to ask a lot of questions. They requested more information. So when they come back for the final 3 days, the first half day will be hearing from more government officials across the board on what policies and programs are in place, what has worked, what hasn't, where the resource shortages are. In very short order, these delegates become experts. They have more expertise than 99% of the people in this community. Then they'll spend the second half, those last 2.5 days, breaking off into subcommittees, very much like a small legislature, and deliberating on possible solutions and how to prioritize the resources that are available. And then at the very end, they will present those recommendations to local government officials. And this will get right back to your second question. We considered this a prerequisite that was immutable. We could not start this process unless we had local government buy-in. From day one, local city councilors were really behind it. Some of them are social scientists. Some of them are just imaginative and supportive of innovative ways to get people involved. But what we actually did, it took about 6 months to present to the city council, to the Deschutes Board of Commissioners, and get them to actually vote to sign a memorandum of agreement that says, not only do they endorse this process and they'll help amplify it and support us, but they actually have committed to taking those recommendations that come out of the assembly, publicly deliberating on them, and then reporting back to the community on whether they will implement the recommendations or not. So there's a clear line for these assembly members from their service to actual progress on the challenge. It's not just a town hall. It's not just a focus group. They're actually a part of the process. And you can't do that without government buying in.
Yeah, that integration with government, the idea that you have a lottery and that you're going out and talking to citizens, to me, addresses another issue which is happening in our society, which is a loss of faith in experts. There's just an overall loss of faith in people that we now call elites. That's a dangerous thing. But the idea that you take people who are experts and then help train a group of people that you pick at random that represent the society so they can think about it, talk about it, break the issues down, uh, put in their own assumptions as opposed to the assumptions of experts, and begin to create a new set of experts that it's more democratic. Uh, to me, that solves one of the problems that we're having with the loss of expertise or experts becoming the bad guys inside the system, and then connecting that to councils where they're bought in the beginning. I've taken part in lots of town halls, but it seems like at the end of every town hall, nothing happens or very little happens. The idea that you've connected that to the elected body up front, to me, seems to be very astute.
It's critical. It was some of the first questions. These delegates and government officials alike took a real leap of faith to put some of these decisions in the hands of one another. We told government officials, look, there's no guarantee that what comes out of this is going to make you happy on both sides.
I can understand an elected official, because I think I would have been too, being terrified about what Pandora's box am I about to open. But it really is
Yeah.
about having a faith in democracy.
And at the same time, it also, in a reverse kind of way, it also gives a little bit of top cover to make tough decisions. If you're an elected official who's run on a platform and you don't think you're going to be able to make the real change, you just don't do it. The great example of this is in Ireland at the national level. They did an assembly where they brought in 100 people from across the country, representative of the demographics, to talk about constitutional reform on abortion and talk about the most difficult topic you could get in Ireland. And in essence, the assembly came out after, I think, more than 20 days of deliberation with a 2/3 majority saying that there should be a national referendum on constitutional reform. And that had been posed before by legislatures, but never approved because it was just too thorny. But with the backing of this National Assembly behind it, some could just put up their hands and say, it's what the people want. Sure, we'll give it a shot. And they did. They put it to a national vote, and almost to 0.1%, the same percentage of people across the country voted as the assembly did, just proving that you could give that.
I think it's really easy to get lost on this concept on an issue, right? Because we have so many. We have immigration, abortion, what's going on with woke society and what's going on inside of our college campuses. There are so many problems that are so divisive in our society. But the thing that, to me, is the biggest problem that you're addressing, it's the divisions that exist in our country. It's people feeling isolated, like they're not a part of it, that maybe they don't own this thing that we call democracy and that we call our country. And the truth is, they do own it. They have an ability to take part in it. One person can make an incredible difference if they want to. But there hasn't really been a great democratic structure for people to feel engaged. And you're addressing that problem in a very, very unique way. As other communities start to watch what you're doing, if they wanted to take part in it, if they wanted to do the same thing in their community, what would you recommend to them?
Well, first of all, our partner who couldn't be here with us today, Claudia Schwales from the organization Democracy Next, has done research on over 500 of these types of assemblies over the past decade and has put together a playbook on how to actually start from zero, get the community involved, get local government involved, and then sort of go step by step on how to build one. I would start there for sure.
And give the name of her organization again. We'll put it up. I was a little disappointed also that she couldn't make it, but I understand conflicts end up happening. But she has a great organization in terms of what they're doing. Would you give the name again, and we'll make certain that we run that up on our screen. And I'm also going to send a copy of this clip to a couple hundred elected officials that I know around the country that are involved in local government. But the name of the organization.
It is Democracy Next. Their website's demnext.org. And Matt's a board member, so he knows it well.
And in your experience, who usually reaches out to them? Someone from the community, or is it a council member or mayor? Where is it that they engage most of their ability to extend their program throughout the country?
Really, it comes from across the board. Since we've been in the press here in Central Oregon, I've had outreach from civil society groups in Klamath Falls and Portland. Had a conversation with the mayor of a city in Connecticut, Akron, Ohio. It really runs the gamut. Um, it used to be, before we started to get this feeling that we were hearing every day that democracy is at risk, that people didn't pay much attention to it. But where there's a fire, that the goodness in the heart of Americans is people stand up and realize they've got to pick up a bucket and start throwing some water on it. And the
Do you know what
interest in
do you know what the genesis was of Claudia's organization connecting to your community?
that guy with
So
the hat
I'm the
on.
genesis of connecting the organization. So as I mentioned that, so Josh said I serve on the board of Democracy Next, and Claudia and I had connected via Azim Azar out of London, who runs the Exponential View community, and Claudia had been at the OECD. We had done the experiment of the Decency Project here in Central Oregon, and that was, how do we scale this? What's a scalable mechanism? And Claudia had already, put together Democracy Next and Citizens Assemblies that, as Josh had outlined, it's already being used incredibly successfully outside of the U.S. In hundreds of different examples. And this was, wow, there's already a scalable, established type of mechanism here in the Citizens Assembly effort. So how do we take this then and do so in the United States and within our local community here? And to your prior question, engagement for Democracy Next, it's come from museums, it's come from city planners, it's come from universities. So it's not just around, the intractable issues, if you will, in relation to homelessness or otherwise, but this is about, a organizational structure of truly instilling and enabling trust among each other and problem solving across any number of different topic areas.
All right, Matt, you said something which was almost a dog whistle to me. You talked about in a couple of answers ago the importance of capitalism. Now, I just want to talk about this for a minute because it's easy for these things. I've been involved in business for a very long time. I've also been involved in government for a very long time, and many of my business friends will see things like this as mushy, right? They'll go, "Oh, yeah, that's the mushy democratic thing." Uh, there is a strong connection. I don't think it takes anyone very long to recognize there's a strong connection between democracy and free enterprise. In fact, it goes all the way back to Adam Smith and his ideas being tied into what happened with our founders. Our founders believed that you should have, they didn't call them this then, but civil rights, equal rights, and human rights were all outlined in those words where they talked about we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. But it also was about property rights and free enterprise as well as free markets. Those things were interconnected. And in fact, part of the way that we've been able to pay for all of these social programs and the great things that we've done in America has been because we've had this strong economy. But there is an interconnection between them. It does seem to me that we're at risk right now because of the divisions of losing both. And the free enterprise system may be the first one on the chopping block if we don't find a way to integrate our community and find a way for people to communicate with one another. I'm assuming from listening to your answer that the free market is something that matters to you. So I'd love to just hear your opinion on that.
Look, I tend to view it. Look, I'm sure you're familiar with the Edelman Trust Barometer.
Yes.
You know, 20 plus years of creating the Edelman Trust Barometer report, and they've shown the decline in trust writ large, decline in trust in NGOs and governments, and the most trusted are businesses. But even the trust in business is declining. And so, to your point, both are in jeopardy, right? And this is where um, I use the analogy of public health. Public health is not about health. It's about economics. If your supply chain is sick, if your customers are sick, if your workers are sick, you can't make money. The same is true in relation to our trust deficit here and our societal health. If our societal health is fractured, if it's broken, so on and so forth, then we know, and plenty of research the world over, then that your direct economics, period, are going to suffer. And this is where, unless we are investing in the solutions, and by the way, citizens assemblies are one solution. They're not a panacea.
There is no
Unless we're
panacea.
there is no panacea. So unless we create this civic entrepreneurial environment, if you will, this trust entrepreneurial environment, invest in the solutions which can enable that core trust aspect, then you're right. Our free market aspects, or so-called free market aspects, and our business, and entrepreneurship areas will suffer at large. And look, Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett are probably the most storied here. That talking about trust, and it's something that you don't notice when it's there, but you sure as hell notice when it's gone.
Yep.
And I'm going to tie back in the military aspects here, because I think it's so representative, and that's this distinction between soft power and hard power, and that squishy stuff of soft power is dismissed in part because it doesn't make for good movies, right? Hard power, seeing things, blow shit up, whatever it may be. That's a great movie. It'll sell tickets. And a mutual friend of Josh and mine, a former Green Beret commander in Afghanistan, he punched out and went to Harvard Business School and went back to Afghanistan to do research on how much money could you give in each province that would stabilize it, how much money was too much that would lead to corruption, and then comparing and contrasting that with the dollars that we were already spending per soldier per year in theater. It was about $1 million per soldier per year. It was a tiny, tiny amount of dollars to give to each province to have someone pick up a shovel and help dig an irrigation canal, versus pouring money in, which was leading to corruption. So that small soft power economic investment, which would stabilize and create a vibrant community and society, there wasn't a lot of money that was needed for that would actually have massive returns. And yet that is something that, again, it doesn't make for a great story. It doesn't make for good Hollywood and TV. But that is the type of substrate and foundational pieces that it's pretty basic. And those basic things, just like in public health, like those basic things, wow, that leads to more stabilized, more economically vibrant communities that someone now has the opportunity to, do a business of their choosing, so on and so forth. So
I'd love to chime in on,
I'll pause there.
on an extension of that, which we haven't hit on, which is the mental health crisis that we're experiencing in this country. The level of depression, and especially with young people, that is leading to a true public health crisis. And what we've also seen in the research on citizens' assemblies and deliberative democracies is that sense of getting involved really helps to establish the sense of belonging, not just for the people who are involved, but for their family members, their friends. And as we do more and more of them in this community, the people who are exposed to this idea that you can have agency and it can build your sense of belonging and community, and that you can have friends that you didn't quite agree with, can really hit on tying together the idea of, if we establish new ways to rebuild that virtuous cycle of trust and strengthen the social fabric, we're looking at what I've heard Matt refer to as a return on democracy. It's not a return on investment in a traditional sense, but that ROD is immeasurable, and it ties right back into the local economy, because people who are happy and involved and engaged in the community and not sitting at home worried about what's going to happen next are creating a more thriving economic ecosystem in the local community as well.
Yeah, Matt, you another dog whistle you used was that word abundance. And for me, that's a dog whistle because, I personally think that there's nothing like the United States in terms of our presence as a superpower. Nothing. There's no society ever that's done more to advance human progress than the United States and Western liberal democracy. The data is absolutely clear about it. But you wouldn't know that from the message that we're being pounded with on a regular basis. And in fact, I had an argument about this with a friend of mine the other day, talking about how terrible college campuses are and what are these professors doing. Well, my answer is when they leave school and they watch television, they're seeing an absolute destruction of the American brand. What that does is it leads people to believing that we're in a a scarcity type of environment, that there's not enough resources, that we can't fix these problems. But as you all are doing these debates and these discussions, they begin to figure out a lot of this is just imagination problems. That's all it is. It's the problem of trying to think outside the box and understand the resources that you have. There's never been more abundance than we have here in the United States. It's unprecedented. Talk to me about how, I want to hear this maybe as our last question. How does this process, I love that term, return on democracy, and you're going to hear me use it, so at some point you can say, hey, that guy stole that from me. But talk to me about how this actually does this. How does it help create in your mind more of an abundance mentality amongst the people who take part?
I think first and foremost is the trust aspect. Like, it's building that that trust capability that is lacking today, and it goes. I harken back to FDR. It was freedom from fear, or in his broader four freedoms. And this is what, again, it's one part of the solution to enabling people. Josh mentioned this, of having this agency and having an understanding in a world that the term VUCA, if folks aren't familiar, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Like, the more we're living in an incredibly VUCA world where people, if they're fed that fear-based piece, instead of, hey, here's the hope, here's the optimism, here's my agency and the ability to solve these things. Like, we just need to provide the enabling fabric for that. And we've done this in the past. FDR did this. JFK did this with, hey, we're going to go to the moon in 10 years. I don't know how we're going to do it, but hey, I need the American public. Go figure it out. And this is one of those solutions that enables this. Here's a hard problem. We're going to trust our fellow community members, our fellow citizens, to actually sit down and figure this out. There will never be a perfect solution, but go figure out the solution to this particular problem the best way that you can right now. Josh?
Yeah, and I might, before I get to Josh, or I'm going to give this to Josh next, but that another dog whistle you had was that word agency. You just kind of keep throwing those out. But it's the idea, when we talk about a panacea, I'll give you a panacea. More citizens engaging in the process and recognizing how much abundance we have in the United States and that it's just a problem of imagination. There's a panacea, all right? Now, the problem is, how do you scale something like what you have? That I can see as being a challenge. But if people recognize the truth, it begins to make a difference. This idea that Matt mentioned of agency, all agency is a belief that the actions that I take, the things that I do, are going to determine my future, right? And if you believe that, then you believe you have self-agency. On the other hand, if you're operating off that amygdala, you're going, there's nothing I can do that can fix this problem. This is all about somebody else who's screwing me over at some level, business or the power brokers in Washington, D.C., whoever it is. That concept of self-agency is so fundamental to who we are as a country. For us to continue to be successful, we've been incredibly successful because of people believing they had agency. I'm worried about people losing that sense of agency. Josh, I'm going to give you the last word, but if you would address that subject and how you think that plays into it, meaning the people when they leave this, how they feel and what effect it has on their life, as well as any recommendations you might give to other people considering doing the same thing.
Yeah. Well, look, I see agency as bifurcated. You can have passive agency and active agency. And if someone hands you the controls and you've done nothing to get it, that doesn't build community. That doesn't build a sense of common purpose. When you have to work a little bit for it, active agency is what really creates this idea that we're all in it together. And Matt alluded to this early on. I spent 25 years in the Air Force in special operations. And when I would come back and be thanked for my service, I appreciated it every time. But I'd like to see, like we did during the pandemic, frontline healthcare workers and first responders, but also public servants people who could be doing probably something a lot more economically viable, thanked for their service. And when we come back to the people who were involved in a citizens assembly, across the board, in hundreds of cases, the people come out of it feeling as if they've had a transformative experience. People who have walked in on day one and said, I don't know what's going to happen here. I'll give it a shot, or there's a specific problem I want to solve. And they come out of it talking about their reinvigorated belief in one another, in their community, in their own ability to actually create change. And it's a powerful, powerful thing. And when they can then look across the street and see the people walking into City Hall and say, wow, those guys actually are trying to do stuff for us. I didn't know about it. And it just builds and builds, especially when we do it across a community. And I'll tell you, we built this process here to be scalable and replicable across the country. We're already talking with other communities about the best ways to go about it with the least friction. We're very fortunate here to have government who wants to create something that will become long-term public-private partnership. There's a lot more to go into there, but I think we've got to focus. My advice to communities would be trust in one another, sit down, and you can't start from zero. Check out the playbook, give me a call. I'll help talk about it, but you can't be just a passenger and expect to feel positive about what you're doing in the world. Active agency is where it's at.
Yeah, and I can't say enough about thanking you, both of you, for your involvement in this. You keep talking about local as if that's a smaller deal. And in my opinion, we're not going to solve our problems in Washington, D.C. I mean, we're just not going to. We're going to solve them on a local basis. And it's lots of local communities all engaging. And if enough people do that, and if enough people gain self-agency, all elected officials they're a reflection of the public. And if the public's focused on all of their grievances, then the elected officials are going to be focused on the grievances. But if people at the local level and at the community level begin to recognize the power that they have, the ability that we have to make a difference, to change things for the better, our elected officials will begin to reflect that as well. Gentlemen, my hat's off to both of you. Claudia, who's not here, I definitely take my hat off to her. I hope that she has, and Matt, your involvement with them, that you have extreme success in taking this out around the country. And anything that I can do to be of help, we're here. Thanks again for being a part of the program.
Many thanks, Paul.
Paul, thank you.